I think Wes Streeting was out there saying we've got a lot to learn from this guy, and they have.
Britain's Zohran Mamdani.
So I think it is possible for Labour to learn good lessons from New York, but if they learn the wrong message, which is let's have another Jeremy Corbyn, I mean, catastrophe.
In America, as you say, the Democrats are in opposition, and I think there are very clear lessons for the Democrats. You have got to move on from this old generation who run the Democrat Party, who now look very long in the tooth. I have to admit, I am slightly obsessed at the moment with Zohran Mamdani's social media, because I've started looking in preparation for this podcast at his clips, and the algorithms which therefore drive my social media feed have been showing me even more clips of him than I wanted. And he is brilliant. I mean, they are really, really energetic and real and thought through. And, you know, he's recorded things a year ago that he's now playing. So you show, you know, there's sort of been preparation. And he's unbelievably charismatic. And there's a bit of the kind of young Obama in him. There's something almost messianic about him. He's who is he? He's a 34-year-old assembly member in New York City. He's not really done anything much other than politics. I'm not against that in people's lives, but you know, he certainly, his opponents in this election said he hadn't done very much. He absolutely has put himself as the champion of working New Yorkers. He uses the phrase "the working class," which is much more unusual in American politics than it is in British politics, where actually politicians have tended to ally themselves to the middle class. And he's made the centerpiece of his campaign affordability, which is it translates in Britain to cost of living. And he's got some policies we'll go through, but they're kind of like government-run grocery stores in areas where, you know, people won't set up shops in New York, and, you know, free bus travel and a much higher minimum wage and so on. A couple of other odd things about him. First of all, he was born in Uganda, so we don't need any speculation about whether this guy is going to be the next president of the United States. He can't be. The Constitution doesn't allow him to be. And although he has made himself the champion of the working people, and although he speaks very authentically about it in these social media clips, he is in fact the son of a very successful Hollywood director. His mother was the director of a big hit a couple of decades ago called Monsoon Wedding. So he's actually got a Hollywood royalty. But put that to one side. Doesn't matter where you came from. It's where you're going. I don't know about you, but just it is a bit of a breath of fresh air in an American political climate, which at least for the last sort of 12 years seems to have been dominated by septuagenarians and octogenarians. And we all like, where are the young people? Where are the young Obamas and JFKs and Bill Clintons in American politics? Well, here we have the new mayor of New York City. Let's start with this was Donald Trump who's weighed into this race in the city, which, to be fair, you know, he is a New Yorker, but he doesn't hold back. This was an interview he did a few days before the election on Tuesday.
Zohran Mandani, 34-year-old Democratic Socialist. He's the front
communist, not socialist, communist. He's far worse than a socialist.
Some people have compared him to a left-wing version of you, charismatic, breaking the old rules. What do you think about that?
Well, I think I'm a much better-looking person than him, right?
You know, I just wanted to play that clip because it's so funny. Anyway, we played the clip, but you know, the point was that not just Trump, but in fact the Democratic establishment, the Democrat Party establishment, for example, Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, you know, refused to endorse this guy, have absolutely seen him as far too left-wing, far too of a kind on the sort of radical Bernie Sanders, AOC end of the Democrat Party. And even today, you know, not all of them have sort of got behind his victory. But to understand, I think, his appeal, you've got to look up his social media videos of him talking to ordinary New Yorkers. Here's one he did, as I said earlier, months ago, preparing the ground for his run for the mayoralty.
How's it going, guys? Do you have 60 seconds to talk to us about the election? How you guys doing? Do you guys want to talk about the election for a minute? How you doing, boss? How's it going, sir? Excuse me, ma'am. How you doing, boss? 1 year ago, we were here. talking to New Yorkers after Donald Trump won the presidential election. What we're finding today, do you remember exactly where we went? There are far more people excited about the possibility of politics in this city on the same street, where last year there were very few who were looking to have that conversation.
He's definitely got a kind of a very easy style. He's very sort of relatable, despite everything thrown at him by the Democrat establishment. You know, his opponent was actually the former Democrat governor of New York City. Sorry, the former Democrat governor of New York State and part of the kind of aristocracy of the Democrat Party, Andrew Cuomo. And they all were having a go, you know, essentially saying this guy is dangerous and left-wing and, you know, but he had a kind of relatable quality and he has a messianic quality. And I think you get a sense of it in his acceptance speech as well.
If anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it is the city that gave rise to him. This is not only how we stop Trump, it's how we stop the next one. So Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
So I bet there are a lot of Labour MPs out there. I mean, if I'm interested in this guy, but there are a lot of Labour MPs saying, why don't we have someone like that? And maybe we should be moving to a much more aggressive socialist message, which is tax the rich to help the working class.
Jeremy Corbyn said at the weekend, he's my guy, caused controversy by saying that he was getting the vote out for Mandani. There will undoubtedly be not just left-leaning Labour MPs saying that. I think Wes Streeting was out there saying we've got a lot to learn from this guy, and they have. But
Britain's Zoran Mandani.
But the thing is always to make sure you learn the right lessons, not the wrong lessons. So,
right.
So let us start. First of all, compelling, charismatic, a great communicator, but also, as Barack Obama actually said in the last few days, he didn't follow Trump onto the issues Trump wants the argument to be about: identity politics, trans rights, sanctuary cities. He placed it absolutely on the economy and cost of living. And if you look at the results more generally this week, centrist candidates, not democratic socialist candidates, winning in Virginia and in New Jersey. The polling says that for people who said the economy is the biggest issue, those were the most likely people to be switching over to vote for the Democrats. Democrats outpolling how they did under Harris in all of these races, in district after district. Young people who people were worrying were going to Trump, big switch back to the Democrats, in particular in New York, but more widely, also Hispanic voters coming back to the Democrats. Trump unpopular, not just as he says because of the government shutdown, but because people are feeling worse off and prices have been up. And
by the way, his $300 million ballroom is going down like a lead balloon at the moment in America.
But I think actually tariffs are a tax on working Americans, and that is coming through. So it tells you, get down to the economic message and then communicate it in a compelling way, in a way which unites your coalition against the opposition, in this case, Trump. I mean, the New York thing, I mean, look, he ran against a disgraced former governor in New York, Cuomo, an establishment figure.
Disgraced because he had to resign over a sex scandal.
Over sex scandals. But of course, this is New York, Democrat New York, in which pretty much every council member is a Democrat. To say that you should learn how to beat Farage in Britain from this is a bit like winning a ward in Brighton from the Greens, and then Labour saying we beat the Greens in Brighton with a compelling Green socialist message. Let's do that elsewhere. And to be quite honest, the same message doesn't quite work in Caillin or in Stockton South or wherever. That isn't the point. The idea that you say you could win as a democratic socialist in New York, therefore that should be our message, I mean, is crackers. And I think actually the Democrats, if they have any sense, will not learn that message. What they will say is, from opposition, because they're in opposition in America, what you have to do is have a unifying and compelling message, which means the left and the centre and the right within the Democrat Party can all come round a positive programme of change and in opposition to Trump. And that is what they have to do. It's harder if you're in government because in the UK, Keir Starmer's in power, Rachel Reeves are in power. But I think the same message applies. What you don't do is think, why don't we sound like Zach Polanski across the UK?
He's the Green Party leader.
The Green Party leader, because that might win us some Green votes in Brighton or even in constituencies across the country. Because what you know is that is going to take you away from the message which you need around on tax and the economy and cost of living for many parts of the country. But what you have to do is be charismatic in your communication, which is an important challenge for Labour. Secondly, you have to avoid own goals, which look like you are moving away from the values which should unite your coalition, like, for example, abolishing the winter allowance. And then you have to think, what are the things which we can talk about which unite our coalition? And, there's no doubt growth, but I would actually say climate change, international development, child poverty.
Well, hold on. They've just slashed the international development budget. Right?
Well, I mean, absolutely. So that is a problem for Keir Starmer in putting together that kind of unifying coalition. But you can find some ways in which you can talk about tax and fairness and the rich. But I think the lesson from the US is, and it's harder from government, is you have to unify a broad coalition. Be clear that you're talking about the things people really care about, which at the moment is the economy and cost of living. Pick the issues which can unite your coalition in a progressive way and double down on them, and then don't have own goals which split your coalition. I mean, it could be that Labour talks about strengthening the relationship with the European Union. I mean, that works for a Green voter and or a Green tempted voter. But actually what we know is quite a lot
works for me.
Yeah, but it also works for if you look at reform voters or reform tempted voters, there are conservative reform voters who are wanting a Farage type message, but there are lots of kind of Labour reform tempted voters who want something quite different, who actually think tackling climate change is quite important and think that the working with our international partners on international development is quite important. And the same, but what they want is hard policies on the cost of living and sorting out the economy in a way which works for working people. So I think it is possible for Labour to learn good lessons from New York, but if they learn the wrong message, which is let's have another Jeremy Corbyn, I mean, catastrophe.
Yeah, and look, and by the way, I said I was obsessed with him a little bit. I'm not obsessed with his policies because they, to my mind, don't remotely add up. So, but
they're easier to talk about before you've won than they are to deliver in government.
Surely, I mean, I would say, okay, obviously we're talking about what the left in Britain should learn, but maybe actually the real lessons are for the Conservative Party in Britain. In America, as you say, the Democrats are in opposition. And I think there are very clear lessons for the Democrats. You have got to move on from this old generation who run the Democrat Party, who now look very long in the tooth and are associated with past failures. So you need to let the younger candidates come through. And you need to get away from the identity politics, which has obsessed a lot of the elements of the Democrat Party, including the younger elements, and focus on the economy. And that is what he has done very effectively. And Donald Trump won the election essentially on cost of living. But as you say, partly his policies are contributing to a higher cost of living. So that's where you'd go as the opposition. And here in Britain, I think the Conservative Party would do well to study his win. Now, he's got a charisma which is very hard to match, and it's not an obvious person in Britain, on the right who's got that kind of charisma. But two things. One is, he did make brilliant use of social media, and he wasn't afraid to do what you can do in opposition, which is so hard in government, to just get out there on the streets and be amongst ordinary folk. It's what Robert Jenrick's done a bit with his videos. It's actually what Rory Stewart did a few years ago when he was thinking about a mayoral campaign. But that's what Mamdani did. And that why isn't Kemi Badenoch out there? And I really study the new forms of communication because I think he has brilliantly exploited them. And second, it's a bit of a repetition of what you said and what we've been talking about on this podcast, but it maybe is a good place to end. Economy, affordability, cost of living, because, the Labour government are up against it partly because of global forces beyond their control, partly because of decisions they've made. And if they're going to raise taxes in this budget, affordability is going to be a big theme in British politics for some years to come.
I think that's right, but I think there was another wrinkle in this as well, which is relevant for the Conservatives, which is there was a really good piece by Ezra Klein, the American columnist, in the New York Times at the weekend, talking about the Democrats and pointing out that these days party loyalty is becoming much more important in American politics. You're either a Democrat or Republican, but if you have a narrow view of what it is to be a Democrat, then you might win in New York, but it's much harder on the same platform to win in Maine or to win down in Kentucky or in Arkansas. And you have to be able to win in lots of different places.
Yeah, sure.
And therefore, what you can't do is the leadership can't pick totemic issues which you say, unless you sign up to exactly what we're saying, you're not really one of us, because that is narrowing. You have to embrace breadth of place to win, therefore breadth of view, and focus on the things which unite your coalition. And for Kemi Badenoch, the corollary with Keir Starmer, if Keir Starmer simply says, unless you are an Islington liberal, you can't properly be Labour these days, then you lose the red wall. If Kemi Badenoch says, unless you join me in a Farage-leaning, anti-ECHR, anti-Europe, doubling down on that identity view of what it is these days to be a Conservative, and a George Osborne Conservative is not welcome in the party, she can't win. And you have to find a broad platform.
Yeah, she's got to win back Kensington, Chelsea, Tunbridge Wells. I mean, you know, all the seats in Oxfordshire.
And let's be honest, Zach Belansky doesn't have to do that, because he can succeed as a Green leader simply by winning some Green seats in areas where he's got a chance. Nigel Farage was also like that before. Nigel Farage is now thinking, actually, do I want to be a more broad-based political party? Maybe I need to listen to Richard Tice and appeal to the golf club Conservative, not simply the hard-line MAGA-style ideologue. Kemi Badenoch can't fall into that trap as well. And I think that is the right lesson to learn from New York, not be a Democrat socialist or a MAGA Trumpian to win, because that's the wrong lesson to join for a political party. You've got to be broad coalitions.
At some point, he'll probably make a visit to London, won't he? The mayor of New York. I imagine the mayor of London's quite excited. I think maybe the person who sees himself as his brother-in-arms is Sir Sadiq Khan.
May I say, if you want to get Mandani round for, I don't know, what am I going to say here, like a little group in the Cotswolds to meet Conservative MPs, I would just downplay the J.D. Vance link.
Oh, okay.
I'm just not sure that's going to work.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking I was going to be the guy who brought him to London.
You could, but just downplay the J.D. Vance stuff.
Okay. Point taken.
That's my advice.
All right, thank you.